In 1970, an ordinary Australian could buy a home with just 2 years' wages. Today, it takes more than a decade. This did not happen by accident. A series of policy decisions transformed homes from places to live into financial assets, driving prices to 12 times the average income. If Australian houses now cost 10 times more than they should, what broke the deal? And who made that choice? In 1970, home ownership was woven into ordinary Australian life. The numbers told a simple story. The national median house price sat at $18,500. The average worker earned just over $5,000 a year. For many, the dream of a home was not a gamble, it was a plan. Take a young electrician in Melbourne, bringing in $5,500 a year. Saving at a steady pace, he could put aside $3,000 in 2 years, enough for a deposit on a $15,000 brick veneer house. The bank would lend the rest, with repayments of about $100 a month. That mortgage did not hang over him for a lifetime. By his mid-40s, the house was paid off. No family windfall, no lottery win, just wages and discipline. This was not the story of the wealthy or the lucky. It was the baseline. Streets filled with families who owned the roof over their heads, not as an investment, but as a place to live and to grow old. Public housing made up a solid share of new builds, and home ownership rates climbed to 70%. The deal was clear: work, save, buy, and by middle age, the house was yours. For a generation, that was how Australia worked. The numbers made sense, and so did the promise. In 1983, the Australian government removed the old limits on how much banks could lend. Suddenly, credit was everywhere. Mortgage approvals surged, and between 1983 and 1989, the volume of new housing loans more than doubled. Banks, no longer restrained by lending caps, competed to hand out bigger loans, and the average household debt began to climb. For the first time, buyers could borrow far more than their parents ever imagined. The Reserve Bank's data shows household debt-to-income ratios rising sharply through the decade. As more money chased the same homes, prices started to pull away from wages. Interest rates did not make it easy. By 1989, a standard home loan came with a 17% interest bill. Even so, demand kept growing. The median house price in Sydney doubled by the end of the decade, reaching $180,000. The average wage was $30,000. The price-to-income ratio hit 6 times the annual wage, a figure that would have seemed impossible just a few years earlier. In 1985, another policy arrived with the introduction of capital gains tax. The new law taxed profits on investment properties and shares, but left the family home entirely exempt. That exemption set up a new divide. Owner-occupiers kept their gains untaxed, while investors faced a bill. The intention was to protect the family home, but it also planted the idea that housing could be more than shelter. The combination of easy credit and a tax-free principal residence began to reshape how Australians thought about property. Suddenly, a house was not just a place to live, but a potential source of wealth. On the 21st of September 1999, the federal government rewrote the rules on property investment. From that day, anyone who sold an asset they had held for more than a year, like an investment property, would only pay tax on half the capital gain. The numbers changed overnight. Before, if a landlord bought a house for $200,000 and sold it years later for $400,000, the tax office treated the entire $200,000 profit as taxable income. For someone on the top marginal tax rate, that meant a bill of $94,000. After the new law, only half the gain counted. The same landlord making the same sale now paid tax on just $100,000, cutting the bill to $47,000. 50% off, no matter how large the profit. Economists called it a windfall for investors. Suddenly, the after-tax return on property shot up. The incentive was clear: buy, hold and sell, knowing the tax office would slice your bill in half. For landlords already using negative gearing, claiming rental losses against their salary, this was a game changer. Not only could they absorb years of rental shortfalls as tax deductions, but when the time came to sell, the profit was taxed at a discount. A landlord in Sydney remembers the moment. She had been running a loss on a rental house for years, offsetting the shortfall against her income. When she finally sold, the tax saving was so large that she later said it felt like the government was paying her to be a landlord. Economists like Saul Eslake describe this as the biggest single incentive for property speculation in Australian history. The calculator did not lie. What once looked like a risky, slow-burn investment now offered after-tax returns too good to ignore. Investors noticed. So did the housing market. Investor activity in the housing market accelerated at a pace Australia had never seen before. In the decade after the capital gains tax discount took effect, the share of homes bought by investors doubled. CoreLogic data shows that by 2010, nearly 4 out of every 10 new dwellings were purchased by investors, not owner-occupiers. In Sydney, the median house price climbed from $300,000 in 2000 to $600,000 by 2010. The average wage during that time rose from $45,000 to $70,000. The price-to-income ratio widened from 6.7 times annual earnings to 8.6 times. By 2020, the median price in Sydney crossed $1 million, pushing the ratio to 11 times the average wage. Today, it sits at around $1.2 million, 12 times what an average worker brings home in a year. At street level, the impact played out in real time. Auction days became a contest between young families and seasoned investors. A couple in their late 20s, pre-approved for $800,000, stand outside a weatherboard house in the inner west. They place their first bid, hands shaking. Within minutes, the price leaps beyond their reach as two investors, both leveraging equity from other properties, push the final sale to $950,000. The couple leaves with nothing but a brochure and a sinking feeling. This scene repeats across suburbs. First home buyers outnumbered, outbid and outlasted. Behind the numbers sits a broader shift. Housing, once a path to stability, now operates as a high-stakes market game. Investors armed with tax breaks and rising equity dominate the bidding. For those trying to buy their first home, the rules have changed. The odds and the market are stacked against them. Planning rules in Australia have long favoured low-rise suburbs over denser development. Local councils set strict zoning codes, often limiting new apartments or townhouses to protect existing neighbourhood character. As a result, Australia ranks among the least dense countries in the OECD, with sprawling cities and few medium-density options. While demand for housing soared, especially through the first 2 decades of the 21st century, new supply failed to keep pace. Net overseas migration surged past 500,000 people in 2023. Yet annual dwelling completions trailed far behind. The mismatch grew sharper each year. Between 2000 and 2025, Australia's population rose by 8 million, but only 1.8 million new homes were built. These planning constraints, combined with rapid migration, left buyers and renters competing for a limited pool of homes. Scarcity became a feature, not a bug, of the system. Ownership patterns have shifted in ways the numbers make hard to ignore. Home ownership, once a steady 70%, has slipped to 66% nationwide. Renting has climbed to nearly a third of all households, the highest rate in decades. The distribution of tax benefits draws an even sharper line. According to the Australian Taxation Office, more than 60% of negative gearing and capital gains concessions flow to the top 10% of income earners. These are not just abstract figures. They shape who gets ahead and who waits. For most, the dream of owning a home now means competing with buyers who receive the bulk of taxpayer-funded support. The system delivers its greatest rewards to those already holding property, while younger Australians and renters shoulder the rising costs. Right now, over 2 million Australian properties are held by investors claiming tax deductions, while home ownership rates drift lower each year. The system isn't broken by accident. It is maintained by design. Until we decide what home should be, affordability remains a choice we keep postponing. What do you think needs to change?